The following is a production of Sharkflight Media.
From mechs to mages or agents to argonauts, this is the world of Chris Kennedy Publishing. This is the CKP Future Books Podcast.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning into this month's edition of Future Books Podcast. This is the December edition, the last podcast of the year, the podcast where we go back and look at what's happened in the year of 2022, and we look forward to 2023. And back from his hiatus last month is our illustrious editor, Commander-in-Chief, Mr. Chris Kennedy. Thank you, Chris, for joining us this month.
Hey, good to be back. I'm sorry to miss it last month, but I'm really glad to be here to close out the year. Lots of good things to talk about. We're going out with a bang here. We got some great things coming up, and then on into next year.
Yeah, I was looking at the slate of what's coming out in December, and this is the first month, I think, in the history of our podcast. There's only one of the books in the list that I know absolutely anything about. So I'm going to be as interested in this as you are.
Yeah, and that one's a Four Horsemen book.
Actually, it wasn't. It was a Fallen World book.
Oh, okay. The Gilded Cage. Okay.
The Gilded Cage. And as I told Casey, for the listeners, we flip-flopped the podcast this month. We did the author interview prior to talking with Chris this month. Ordinarily, it's the other way around. I was totally engaged with this particular Fallen World novel that he did that we'll talk about later. And it's not only a great Fallen World novel, but it's a standalone novel. It's one that you can read without having any idea what Fallen World is and still get a great story out of it. So I'm really excited about The Gilded Cage this month.
Awesome. Well, I think that Casey is really an up-and-coming writer. I think he does a great job. And we can take a minute and talk about him and then, we'll just kind of brush over it when we get there. But I think he's really an up and comer to the point that I put him in for a good deal with an author that many people will know. And hopefully that will be out next year because there's some great things coming that he's part of that I think will probably have some long-lasting runs, and I'll leave it at that.
He did refer to his super secret project he's working on, so
yeah, that's the one.
So yeah, I'm very excited. Basically, anything that comes from CKP that has the word Casey on it, I usually will immediately pick up, and it doesn't really matter which Casey it is.
Yep,
they're all good. So let's talk a little bit about the beginning of the month. We have a book by Mr. Frisbee called Revolution Calling, and it's going to be released the 2nd of December.
Absolutely. It is the 4th book in his Last Marine series, and, it is every bit as good as the first 3. I just finished reading it here, and it's great. I don't want to spoil it for the folks that haven't kept up, but it is everything that you expect out of a Last Marine book, and then some. And there's been tensions rising, badness happening, and you're going to get both of those. There's more tension, there's more badness, and they are trying to figure out how exactly can we save not just the world, not just a couple systems, but, how can we save humanity? So it's really good.
Well, if it's anything like his first 3 books, I know it's going to be great.
It is. It's great.
The Last Marine series has been one of the breakout series, as far as I'm concerned, of the last year. Mr. Frisbee has done an excellent job.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. It really has been. Last year and then into the start of this year was Paul Pyatt's and John Sears' books, the Lunar Free State and Abner Fortis. Those 2 series really had great legs, and they're still doing really well. I actually have the next Lunar Free State book in hand, and it is scheduled for February, the Never Ever War. So both of those continue on, and you'll see more of that as well coming.
So after Mr. Frisbee, on December the 9th, the day before my birthday, we have Mr. Ikenberry, Mr. Kevin Ikenberry, who has a new book out called VORTEX, STINGRAY. And Is this in the Kaiju series?
Yeah, it absolutely is. The first book was The Last Stand, which Kevin and I wrote together.
Which was so good. and it was so funny because the pilot was riding tanks and the tank guy was riding pilots, so that made it even better.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun doing research so that I could write tank stuff. And I think that we did it and we gave it to each other. We swapped and both of us looked at what the other person had done and went, yep, that works great. So that was a lot of fun. And this is the second book in that series, which is The Guardian Covenant. This takes place on the planet of Lua after, and once again, I guess I will just say that after humanity is rescued, this takes place on another planet.
Well, the first book was excellent, other than the fact that you broke my heart by killing, I thought, some great characters way too early.
It broke my heart too. I cried the rest of the day.
But I have to say, after two disappointing kaiju robot fighter movies that had all kind of potential, and especially the second one absolutely was horrible, it's refreshing to read a series with kaiju and fighters done correctly. To me, the VORTEX, STINGRAY, and the first book, The Last Stand, both of those books are the kaiju equivalent of John Ringo's virus zombie books. You know, he was sitting there watching
Walking Dead.
The Walking Dead. Yeah, he was sitting there watching The Walking Dead going, this is stupid. There's much better ways to handle all of this. And it drove him so crazy. He ended up writing a whole series of books of zombies fighting done right. And so to me, this series of books is kaiju fighting done right. So I can't wait to read the second one.
And hopefully my next book, which I'm writing right now, which will be the third book in the series, which is called Point Break, comes out in January. So people won't have to wait that long to get the third book either.
That's great. And then on the 16th of December, we have To Have and to Hold by
Zene Voss.
Zene Voss, that's correct. Tell me about this. I know nothing at all about this.
Well, Zane was tried to get into the last Four Horsemen anthology, and his, you know how when they're stacking, you know, the playoff things and the NCAA tournament, and they go, okay, you know, who's last in, who's first out. He was first out, and I said, you know, this is really a great story, but it's got needs a little more of this, needs a little more of that, and if you want to go back and do that and write a full length story, I'd love to see it. And he said, really? And I said, yeah, oh, absolutely. You got a great idea here. It works well. Make it 100,000 words rather than 10,000. And we got something here. And his eyes kind of got big as he thought 100,000, you know, because this is his first book. So 100,000, I think was a whole lot more daunting than 10, but he said, okay, I'll do that. And he did. And he went off and I didn't hear from him again for, you know, a few months. And I saw him at LibertyCon and he said, I'm done. And I'm like, you're done with what? And he's, that story, I'm done. I wrote it. And I was like, okay, great. You know, and he said, I just need to look at it a little bit and, you know, and I'll send it to you. And I said, okay, great. And he sent it to me and I didn't have time to look at it right away, but I didn't want to leave him hanging. So I asked, you know, hey, any of the Four Horsemen authors, you know, available to look at a story? And Jason Cordova was, and he said, sure, I'll read it. And he's a super fast reader. So I sent it to him and he sent it back like the next day and he said, this is awesome. You need to publish it. Oh, great.
Well, that gives me something to look forward to.
Yeah. The only thing he changed was the name. He said, hey, it ought to be To Have and to Hold. I forget what he originally called it. But we told that to Zane and Zane said, sure, let's do it. So it's coming in December, and it's got not only my, but Jason Cordova's seal of approval.
Well, then that's marked on my calendar, and that will be picked up the day that it's released. Then we have the featured novel this month, The Gilded Cage by Casey Moores. Most of our listeners will know Casey from his Four Horsemen universe novels and short stories. He has a series of short stories with a Depic and a blind assassin that is absolutely fantastic. And,
I love those. That is awesome.
And then he also does some novels with the main character of Bull. For those of you who read the Four Horsemen novels, who last year he gave us the whole backstory of Bull, which was an excellent novel. And so now he's stuck his toe into the Fallen World universe. He had written a short story prior to this, and now he's written a full novel. And this may be one of the best things Casey's ever written. I told him he threw away stuff that could be whole series writing this book. And then after I made a list of them for him, he said, well, you know what? I never thought of that. I'm going to have to rethink some of this because there are some series here.
Yeah. Casey's only problem is that, he wants to do everything. And I've been trying to get him to, okay, you can do everything over the course of your author career, but you need to build yourself something at the start. Who are you? And trying to get him just to stay in one lane to get established. That's been my only thing, because he has so many ideas and wants to do so many things, and they're all good, but it's just hard to build an audience if you do, I'm going to write a sci-fi book, and then I'm going to go do Fallen World, and then I'm going to go write a fantasy. And it's like, try and build one thing first and then build on it.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to have your own voice. Everybody knows exactly who David Weber is and what he writes. And now he writes all kind of different stuff. But for the first 15 or 20 years, you knew exactly what you were getting when you picked up a David Weber book.
Absolutely.
And which suited me just fine, because I didn't have to decide what I was going to do. If I saw Weber and I hadn't read it yet, I bought it. Then he started partnering with this guy called Kennedy. And they started doing vampires.
Well, I can tell you that Tor just picked up the next 3 books, so that's a good thing too.
Well, that's an excellent thing. Anytime you get to work with one of your heroes.
Yeah, we've already turned in the next book, and they're working on accepting it. So hopefully we'll get that out as fast as Tor works anyway. They're not quite as fast as CKP, but at least that one's in, and we've got a contract that calls for at least 2 more. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
That's great. And then we're going to end up the year of 2022 on December 30th with Crucible of the Gods by D.T. Reed. Is that correct?
Oh, that's absolutely correct. And that is the 3rd book in her 7th Shaman series. The 2nd book just came out as we're taping this, just came out a couple days ago. And I cannot say strongly enough that I've read 70 some books this year, and that is the best book that I have read all year. Mountains of the Gods.
And it's something unusual in science fiction. You do not have very many science fiction books that have any kind of Native American flavor to them. And this book here, this series of books, is very much Native American based. You get that flavor when you read this book. And so everything in it, all of the philosophy, all the ethics, all the decisions are made from that perspective, which is refreshing, unusual, and something that I've never seen before. And so I like to push this book out to people as something that will give you a whole different flavor of science fiction than you're used to reading.
Yeah, absolutely. You could not be more right. It gets, it's science fiction, but it also kind of leans toward the science fantasy side, because it does get into some of the shamanistic, American Indian mythos kind of thing, but it works really, really well. And I can't wait to pick up the next book, the Crucible of the Gods, and see where it goes, because honestly, like I said, Mountains of the Gods is the best book I read all year, out of 75. And I say that I many times I say, oh yeah, I really like this book. Oh yeah, this is a great book. And I truly believe in the books that I publish, or I wouldn't publish them. But this one, is probably, I think, the first time that I've ever said, this is the best book I've read all year. And here we are at the end of the year. I've read all of the ones that are going out this year. So, we're at number 75. This isn't, okay, it's the second book I read this year and, it's the best one. This is the last book this year that I read and it's the best one. So, going out with Crucible of the Gods right at the end of the year, is great an ending to the year as I think we could have.
We've covered the books that are going to be released in December, but you think about the last year, maybe a little more, the books and the series that have been released by CKP. We've got the Lunar Free State, we've got William Frisbee's The Last Marine books, the Mountain of the Gods, the Seventh Shaman books. The quality and the variety of books being released by CKP in this year far surpasses anything that has come before. And then we've got the whole New Mythology Press books. John Osborne's House Between Worlds this year. That is a great book.
Absolutely. Chris Nuttall's series is great too.
Oh, yes. I can't wait for number 2 of that.
Yeah, that actually just got turned in today, number 2. So we've got number 2, and it is getting fast-tracked as quickly as Rob Howell can get it out, because the first one's still going like gangbusters.
And that series is going to have legs. He left that wide open enough that it's unlimited the number of books that can be written in that series.
And that's probably going to be a shared universe. We'll probably have other people writing in that universe because it is that big. And I'm all for that.
So looking back at 2022, we kind of started dipping our toe back out of our houses and getting things back to normal. How was the year for CKP?
This has been CKP's biggest year. And it absolutely is on the back of some great, science fiction and fantasy. The series you mentioned, Lunar Free State, Last Marines, Seventh Shaman, Abner Fortis. You look at the Four Horsemen books that are still coming out. You're looking at Fallen World, Salvage Title. The shared universes are still, putting out quality work.
We've got good anthologies that's been coming out all year long.
Yep. The new series that we're doing, Fred Hughes's Prince Awakens, the Prince of Britannia series.
People, if you have not read this, go out, buy this today. It is the best thing ever. As much as Chris loves Mountain of the Gods, that's how much I love Prince Awakens. Of the CKP series that have been released recently, this is the best thing I've read since Lunar Free State.
Yeah.
Period.
So you look at when you combine great books with great covers from great authors, it really works. And we've had some great stuff this year. Even though people have spent less time reading this year than the last couple, I think this is our biggest year ever. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm looking to continue building on it next year with the series we have, bringing in a few more things that are going to be every bit as good or better, which
that's going to be hard to do, brother.
I know. Well, that was what, I said to Diane Reed when I read Mountains of the Gods. I said, "Oh my God, this is the best book I've read all year." And she's like, "How am I supposed to do that again? How do I continue to make it better every time?" And I'm like, "Well, that's a good problem to have, and so that's for me, it's a good problem to have, to try and, continue to raise the bar and get better art and better stories and, get it out to the folks and keep going."
Well, let's also talk about the fact that this is the year that CKP went international. We actually have overseas books now. I think they're being printed as fast as they can be translated.
Yeah, pretty much. We will have right at 75 books from CKP, and I think we just hit 75 from CKP International. And almost all of those are in German, but we've also started Spanish. Salvage Title is in Spanish now, and we're probably going to have our first French books probably just either in end of December or beginning of January. We'll probably start getting into France.
That is amazing. I've followed CKP. This, I think, will be my 4th year of knowing about CKP, 3.5, 4 years. And it's amazing to me from sitting a little outside the company, just watching how fast it grows and watching how diversified the writing is getting. It started kind of as a one-trick pony and has expanded into books that probably should be printed, but nobody else would ever print. And I can't tell you enough how much I enjoy and appreciate what CKP puts out, because you have to have a good story. It's not trying to send a message and there's a story in there. Story comes first in everything that we print.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you've already seen the Nephilim series that'll be coming out next year. So when you say, is it possible to keep raising the bar, that one's coming. And there are a couple others, and there are some really great things coming that, you're absolutely right. A trad pub probably doesn't pick up Seventh Shaman ever, because it doesn't pigeonhole nicely.
It doesn't fit anywhere.
But it's a great story that needed to be told. I think I'm on record for how I feel about it.
Yeah, you sound like me.
Yeah. So that's really one of the reasons that I started doing this, was to try and give people a start. I don't know how many first books that we've had with CKP, but I can tell you, we've already talked about having to hold by Zane Voss. That's his first book. I think the Four Horsemen universe has had the first story published for over 20, I think it's 25, right at 25 authors. So we've given a lot of people the start. And we brought out some stories that really needed to be told, but probably wouldn't have been told, certainly never would have gotten the press that they have. So that's certainly one of the things that I am most proud of.
I'm going to ask a question that you might not can answer, and I should have asked you to research it before we started this, but do you have any idea how young our youngest author and how old our oldest author is?
Well, we've got 2 authors that are pushing 80, and the youngest author, golly.
Why I asked the question more, in addition to just being interested, this company, and Ikenberry and I talked about this last month a little bit, this company is the most collegial, helpful, amongst itself company I have ever been involved with. Almost every time I speak to an author doing one of these author interviews, they constantly refer to the help that they've gotten from one of the other authors or from you, and how everybody talks to each other and treats each other with respect. And I've been around science fiction for a long time, and there's a lot of long-term friendships one-on-one, like Purnell and Niven. But I have never seen a company where there's no jerks, and everybody, absolutely everybody, is invested in making sure that everybody is as successful as they can possibly be. And that had to be hard to build.
It is something that certainly that is by intent. We try to do this as a family. We try to treat each other as a family, and sometimes we have a spat or two, like brothers and sisters. But we've managed to keep everybody together and to do a lot of good things where you get that synergy where the total is better than the sum of the parts. Because everybody drives each other to do better, and we try and help each other out. And if you look at when Marisa and I were writing the last couple Four Horsemen books, I'd write 3,000 and she'd come in and write 4,000, and then so I'd have to get 5 the next day. And Nick Steverson and Melissa Holthoff They have that kind of relationship where they're driving each other too, and they're putting together a lot of good stuff that people will see into the new year. So, I absolutely, we all try and make each other better.
Well, it's something that ought to be recognized and celebrated, because I can't think of any other creative business where people work together the way the people within CKP work together and promote each other and are invested in everybody's success. And that's, if you take nothing else away from this past year, I think that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more.
You want to make a guess on how many books will be published just in the U.S. through CKP next year? What are your goals? I know we're 75 or 76 this year, so you're going to break 100 next year?
No, I don't think I am. I think it'll probably be a little bit fewer than that, than 75. I think probably going to release a little fewer on the sci-fi side next year. Of course, I've said that for the last 3 years, and it's gone up every year since.
Yeah. And this was Ikenberry's off year too.
Yeah, and that will depend on what Rob does, with new mythology.
Right.
But I'd like it to be a little smaller, so that I could do a little bit more with some of the ones that we have.
Yeah. And there is this thing called slate that some of the other people that are involved with CKP do. You might try it. Those of us that do it like it.
Well, and once we get my wife fixed, I'd like to do a little more traveling. So that'll maybe cut into it a little. So we'll see. But probably same level as this year, or slightly fewer.
That would still be a lot of work.
I'm not looking to do more than I'm already doing. If anything, I'd rather do a little less. But sometimes you got stories and you got to put them out. I mean, what do you do? Got good stuff. Got to get it out.
If you don't publish it, somebody will. David Weber said something a few weeks ago when I was at one of his readings. I wish I could. It was from one of the early, I think one of the early Del Rey publishers. He said that publishers don't look for good science fiction. If you write good science fiction, it'll find a publisher. I think almost everything that was published this year by CKP found a home, and it was all quality stuff. And probably 60% of it would have never been published anywhere else, because in many cases, the authors that we published didn't have a name yet. They come up out of the bullpen and they start hitting home runs. Marissa is a perfect example of that.
Absolutely. And Melissa Olthoff right behind her.
Yes. So, which is something else that CKP ought to be proud of, is the fact that it's not like, if you look at the list of authors, almost any of the authors were super famous or super published prior to CKP. Some of them were self-published. Some of them had publishing credits. But mostly this is stuff that would have never been published without CKP being where it is. So it's amazing.
Thank you.
Any sneak preview of anything that you want to talk about for next year that will make us just beat on our desk waiting for something?
I think I already mentioned the one that had you going, and there's a couple other series that I've got the first two books, and I'm waiting for the third one before I put them out, because I want to be able to bring people. I don't want people to have to wait and lose the series. That's kind of the model that I've been going to more here this year, and I think as part of society these days is kind of more of a binge mentality. I like to be able to bring the series, boom, 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 so that people don't have to wait and get lost and forget, where you read the book and you go, all right, how did the first one go? It's been so long. I don't remember, so we've done, I think, a really good job getting series out, about every 4 weeks or 5 weeks, kind of like what we were doing with the Four Horsemen universe. We've done that with some other series here. Last Marine, certainly, Seventh Shaman, Fred Hughes, Prince Awakens, that series. So, that lets people stay engaged and really enjoy them, to the greatest extent possible.
And if you get somebody that read 4 books back to back over a 8-month period of time, then if you do have a 6 or 8 month break before the next book comes out, you've already got an established clientele that has read enough of a series to be totally invested in it. It's not like they've read one book and then it's one thing that CKP can do that traditional publishing just does not do. You write a book and then you wait a year, 6 months minimum, before you can see anything else by that author. And we're able to do sometimes one every other week or one a month or whatever, and get 3 or 4 books under somebody's belt and get them really truly invested in the series so that it is memorable to them and they are looking forward to that 5th book or that 4th book. So it's great. Man, I can't wait to do this again next year. I have had a great time.
I'm looking forward to it too. I've already got, January, February, March, and most of April already lined up. So I can tell you that, let's see, May 5th will be the 6th book in the 7th Shaman. I mean, so, it's just, that's coming. I'm looking at Hughes' book on April 4 or April 7th. That'll be I think the 4th or 5th in that series. So, we're gonna keep doing it. If
they ever do a science fiction award for the most organized publisher in science fiction, I know who's going to win it hands down.
All right. I'll take it.
Well, Chris, we'll talk to you again in January, and we will talk about what the year looks like and how we're going to start off the new year with a new clean slate of books. So thank you so much for talking to us this month.
You bet. And thanks for everything you've done to help promote them this year. I greatly appreciate it. Happy holidays to everybody.
Yeah. And happy holidays to everyone listening. And we look forward to you joining us again in January. So for the second half of the podcast today, we have Casey Moores. He has written in the Four Horsemen universe, and he has written in several anthologies. And today we're going to be talking about his new book, The GUILTED CCAGE. That's not gilded, that's GUILTED, G-U-I-L-T-E-D. It's a new book in the Fallen World series. I have read it. It is a particularly good book, and we were going to let Mr. Moores talk to us today about how he came up with the idea and what led him to write this particular book. Welcome, Casey. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. It's kind of early where I am. I'm in Colorado right now, Mountain Time, but
well, I thought I'd get you up early,
so I think I'll get my brain going.
Yeah, I apologize for this, but with it being Thanksgiving, trying to get a few things in early. So for the people who have not heard you in one of our earlier podcasts, tell us a little bit about how you got started with CKP and some of the books that you've written.
Oh, CKP. Well, I'm going to have to blame Casey Azell for that one. We were both in the Air Force together. We were actually both at the Air Force Academy at the same time, and that actually ties in today's conversation. And then I had a long career flying, obviously she flew Hueys, everybody knows that, and I had a long career flying C-130s for rescue and special ops. And about the time that I had a big, long assignment in England, about the time that I was coming back, I realized that Girl Casey, because I'm Boy Casey, we're Boy Casey, she's Girl Casey, I'm Boy Casey, she's Girl Casey, sorry, had a long, found that she had gotten heavily involved with something called the Four Horsemen universe, and writing for a guy named Chris Kennedy. As soon as I came back, I went to Dragon Con. I started meeting all these people and seeing all these things she's done. At some point, she had jokingly, not really jokingly, but in that way the Girl Casey said, hey, so what do you want to do when you retire? Do you want to write? And I was like, at the time, as buried in the special ops world as I was like, well, I don't know. I'm not really sure. And then I came back, went to the Four Horsemen panel at Dragon Con, wrote a story in my head. That story actually came out as part of As My Witnesses a few months back. But that sort of created a dam burst and got me writing. And I got several novels in the Four Horsemen universe. And then I want to say it was Fantasy last year where Chris Woods and Kevin Stevenson both asked me if I wanted to start writing in the Salvage universe and then the Fallen World universe. I said yes, and that sort of leads us to where we are today.
Well, I will tell you that, and we talked about it off air, of the CKP universes, I really do not read all of the Fallen World books. So I read your new novel with no backstory, no pre-existing thoughts about the book itself. I had no preconceptions going in.
It's a great way to get into the Fallen World. What is going on here? Sorry.
Well, this novel could stand alone as just a great novel. And I've always been a fan of your writing. I've loved everything that you've written. But I almost did not recognize that this was your book because of the structure and the way the characters developed. It's an amazing book. It's very, very easy to read. It's a quick read, and it's a great story. Like I said, it could stand alone as a standalone novel if you know nothing about the Fallen World universe. So I want to give you kudos for doing just a great job on this book.
I appreciate that. That's great to hear. I'll be honest, when I was writing, I was kind of stumbling along at a few points, but I'm really happy with where I got to the end. Where I got, but then what time was finished up. And
I particularly liked the setting of the campus of the Air Force Academy as almost a character in and of itself. All the different places. It was almost like a travelogue built into the novel itself.
I had to showcase a little bit once I decided that that's where it was happening. So, like I said, that's where I went to school way back in, I don't know, back in the Stone Ages.
You made me want to visit the campus. There were several of the buildings that you talk about, particularly the chapel, that makes me want to now, if I'm ever back out on the far side of the country, go by and see the institution. It sounds beautiful.
Yeah, that chapel itself is iconic. That's sort of like the showpiece of the academy. It's from miles away, from all far across Colorado Springs, you can look out up against the mountains and you can spot the chapel and figure out where the academy is from most of the springs.
The fight scenes were really well choreographed. Were those all you, or did you have some help with those?
No, it was largely all me. I think in one or two cases I might have reached out to Ikenberry just to ask him about tank mechanics and make sure that things I was doing could be realistic or, were possible using a tank. I think just about everything else was all me. Yeah.
The novel is very much like a video in your head. You could almost see this as being a 2-hour movie. It moves from action scene to action scene. There's not a whole lot of downtime throughout the book. And your evil characters are just as good as your heroes, which I find a lot of authors have a hard time doing. They can write their iconic hero. They see themselves in that character, and they spend a lot of time crafting, making that character 3-dimensional, and then they put up these little cardboard cutouts for the anti-hero and for all the characters that are not in the spotlight. In this particular book, throwaway characters were 3-dimensional. Your anti-hero, your big bad guy, who isn't really the big bad guy. He's not the super boss at the end of the book, but he's the one that we see the most of. He's not evil. He doesn't care. He has a plan, and anybody who gets in his way is just an afterthought.
And they have reasons for looking at the world that way. Like I was kind of proud of myself for coming up with that progression, that there's a reason they got to where they are. Everybody doesn't start out as a bad guy, and everybody never recognizes themselves as the villain. Maybe sometimes they do, but in this case, like, the world is a bad place, and they have a purpose to what they're doing.
It's like they feel like they're bringing order.
They have to do what they're doing to get there.
Yeah, they're like they're trying to bring order to chaos, but they don't realize that they're the whole reason that the world is in the state that it's in. Their particular brand of order is what brought us to this point in the book. Your ogre in the mountain characters that we see one of, and then we get a glimpse, hopefully, of the future. Those are particularly bad characters. They're kind of like Earthbound Borg.
Yeah, that's something that I'll be excited to develop when I can get back around to this series. Like we were talking about as we opened up just before we started, I do have plans to continue this. I'm actually trying to pull in somebody else, though I can't really make any promises on the time frame just because other things that I have signed on to do that I'm sort of deeply committed to now. But I would like to develop this in the future, that aspect specifically.
Yeah, everybody should buy this book just to read the last chapter because your kind of cliffhanger is eerie and creepy and kind of stays with you. It's kind of like a really spicy meal. You keep burping it up for a couple of days after you read the book.
Wow, that's a great description.
Well, I don't know if it's a great description, but it's accurate. You know, I found myself for a day or two after reading the book. You know, I would be raking leaves because, of course, my house is surrounded by oak trees. So I'd be out there raking leaves and my mind being on idle, and all of a sudden I'd flash back to, I'd say, the last 250 words of your novel, yeah. And it's like, ooh, that's just wrong. And then you start thinking beyond that. I got to figure out how to say this without spoiling the book. Because of what happens at the end of your book, I think it's a foreshadowing of us being able to continue to hate a particular character in your book. And
yes.
That's going to be pretty interesting. You have done a really great job of giving yourself a really good canvas to continue to paint on in this particular book.
Like I said, I'll be really excited to develop that. I did. I was about to let one of those characters go, and then I realized, you know what? There's a lot more this character can do in a totally different way, and there's a perfect setup here waiting for it. So. Yes, that's exactly what I did right there.
Well, it's really cinematic. It's like I said, this book could easily translate into a couple hour movie or a short series.
One of the scenes starts off in Canyon City, at the prison in Canyon City, and I've been there. I've driven by it. I grew up in Colorado. I'm familiar with that area, so that was easy for me to envision. I went to the Air Force Academy, and even before I went to the Air Force Academy, I'd visited the place maybe a couple dozen times for various reasons, just because it wasn't too far away. My parents would take people there on tours. I had soccer tournaments and Boy Scout camps down there. So I was really familiar with that area even before I went there to school. So everything that was happening was very easy for me to envision every step of the way, just from like you said, sort of a cinematic standpoint, from a camera viewpoint of being familiar with that area.
So it sounds like you have a lot of irons in the fire. So does 2023, do you have some other books, some other things coming out with CKP?
Yes. I just finished another Four Horsemen novel. It's a Deepak companion novel. Hopefully, if I can get it edited. I'm not sure, for those familiar with the Four Horsemen universe, or for those not familiar with the Four Horsemen universe, humans are mercenaries in the future, but there's these major intergalactic wars that are spawning up as people learn things about how the galaxy is run. And the background of this, there is a alien assassin race called the Deepak, the Cat Assassins, and they have had some major adversity, and they were trying to grow out of that. My first accepted short story ever was about two characters, a Deepak and a human assassin. And this novel, the novel that I just finished in the Four Horsemen universe, it's in editing. Hopefully it will be the first of the Deepak Companion series. Really excited about that. Companion to Darkness is the name of that one. And it's based on it's a continuation of my short story, Blind Fury. But after all the other events that have happened in the Four Horsemen universe have happened recently. And then beyond that, I've got lots of short stories that I have just pushed out, kind of an absurd amount of short stories in a short amount of time over the last couple months that'll be going off to various things, particularly the continuation of my Death Mage War short story series that I've been given to Rob Howell and a couple other agencies, sort of spreading that out to the universe. That's basically a fantasy World War I setting, but it's a fantasy world that has developed to World War I level of technology, And I've got a wide range of short stories that I've been in various areas. And I just pushed out a couple more of those. In the immediate future, what I'm working on right now, I'm very excited about. I'm still calling it the Secret Project series, but it's a very near future military science fiction where the unlikeliest of countries gets a major military technological boost to initially for survival. But as this series progresses, what survival means is going to expand. So I'm working on that with a co-author. He wrote the first novel and then was looking for somebody else to help him write the rest of the series. So we are doing that now. I don't want to say too much beyond that. So for now, that still remains in the exciting secret project. That is going to dominate most of my time. Hopefully early next year, we'll have maybe 2 or 3 novels written and we can start releasing them somewhat rapid fire. And then someday in the future, I would like to get involved in the JTF, get back to my JTF 13 Civil War monster hunters that I introduced in Witch Hunt. We'll see if I can get back to that. The Legends from Three Ravens Publishing just came out with a short story, which has a prologue short story set in the Mexican War several months back. So look up Three Ravens and look up Legends if you want to get my short story out of that. And then I was just invited to do something else. There's going to be a discussion about that tonight. It's another project that I'm kind of excited about, but that's going to have to be even longer term. And I was very explicit on that. I was like, look, this has got to be like 9 months to a year before I even think of writing anything for you guys along these lines. But I am very interested. I would like to be on the ground on this as well. But that might be me stretching myself too far. We'll see what happens on that. And again, that's another secret project that I won't give any details on because it hasn't been announced yet. Now
I have 2 questions. Let's see, which one do I want to ask you? I want to ask you, so you spoke about writing a lot of short stories and then a few novels that you're currently working on. I've always been fascinated by the difference between short stories and novels. And to me, I've tried to write, and I am not good. But to me, I would think that once you have determined that you can write, that writing novels would be easier than writing short stories because you are so constrained in a short story, and you have such a small amount of time to set your premise because you've only got a certain number of words that you can write, that your editor is expecting from you. Do you find writing short stories harder or easier than writing novels?
It depends. There are 2 wildly different animals, other than the fact that the prose, the developments, the pacing, all those rules still exist for both mediums. Yeah, short stories are a challenge, trying to say everything that you want to say in that short space, and you have to be very poignant about it. You have to be sort of laser focused. And I've kind of got 2 ways of going about that have worked for me. And I kind of apply them at random depending on what kind of inspiration I'm getting for that specific topic or that specific story that I want to tell. Sometimes I have too much going on in my head with relation to that story, and I'll just spill it all out there. And sometimes I'll write 11,000, 12,000 words when I have a 10,000 word cutoff. And then, having said everything that came to mind while I was developing the story, I go back and I just start snipping out everything that is not important to that story. Like all the things where I started world building in ways that aren't unnecessary or unimportant to that story specifically, and things that don't need to be developed yet, or I'll just shorten sentences. And I'll just, I think that's actually how Blind Fury came out. I came out with like 12,000 words. That was my very first real short story that was accepted. And I had to go back and just sort of slice pieces off constantly until I got down into that range.
Well, you're in great company with that, because think about David Weber's In Fury Born. He took it as a short story assignment, wrote a novelette, actually wrote a novel. Jim Bain wouldn't take it at the time. He cut it down to a novelette size, and then people clamored for more of that universe for 25 years, and he finally got his notes out and wrote the entire novel.
And that's one thing. Sometimes when I have all those ideas and I think I can make a novel out of this, I try and turn the short story into a sort of an opening scene. And that's actually what happened with The Gilded Cage. Chris Woods asked me to write a short story, so I wrote him what turned out to be Blue Falcon. For those who are not in the military, go ahead and look up in the Urban Dictionary. Sorry, okay. All right, go ahead and look up in the Urban Dictionary what Blue Falcon means to the military. It also just happens to be the Air Force Academy mascot. And essentially, it's the story, the prequel story, and that's in the Among the Embers anthology from the Fallen World universe. My story, Blue Falcon, sets the stage for what Tyrone was doing the day the world ended and how he wound up where he is when the Gilded Cage starts 20 years later. So, but my point being, I had already had that idea for all those things that were going to happen in the Gilded Cage. So, Blue Falcon became my prologue to that story. And I've done that several times. I always try and craft my short stories at the very least, or most of them, so that they are a setup for something else, either something that could be continued in another short story or something that is a background or a setup for a longer novel. Like I mentioned in JTF 13, I have a novel called Witch Hunt set in the Civil War. Over the course of that novel, everybody knows the main character's father. So when I was asked to write a short story for the Legends anthology, I went back and I wrote the story of that character's father, so that everybody could see what happened on that day, that the generals across the Civil War are still aware of what happened. Going back to your original question, though, I mentioned that writing too much and then trimming down is one of my processes for short stories. I've also found that's about half the time now. If I can spell out the details of everything I want to happen in that short story, I can line it up and pace it out, and I can generally get myself to about 7,000, 8,000 words if I go into it with a good outline, knowing exactly what I want to accomplish and nothing more, and don't allow myself to sort of wander off while I'm writing my short story the way that you're allowed to do in a novel sometimes. So, yeah, there is a laser focus in short stories that you really have to maintain. But those are my two processes for getting that done. One is to not try and then fix it later. The other is to go in with a very specific plan.
The other set of characters in Gilded Cage that I fell in love with is, I will call them your version of the Texas Rangers, so that people won't get any spoilers. Have you thought about maybe a novel with that group? Because, man, they were very interesting.
Well, obviously, I leave it wide open as to where they come from and what they're doing. So, yeah, there is totally an entire world, just maybe 100 miles to the west that I did not explore in any way, shape, or form, other than the fact that they exist and they have been surviving fairly well, it seems, from the way that you meet up with them. But that's actually based on a real group of people that I knew, the Special Forces Motorcycle Club that actually operate in that area. It's a motorcycle group that is all retired veterans, largely from the Special Forces of the military. A friend of mine lived out in that area. Actually, I will give that away. The leader of the group, Rob Disney, is actually a good friend of mine that for a long time lived out in that area after he retired. So I just sort of took that, asked myself what a motorcycle club would be doing 20 years after the apocalypse when they can no longer ride motorcycles, and I found a means of keeping them mobile in a fallen world sort of way.
Yes, I want to know more. I want to know what dealership they went to get those particular modes of transportation, and I would love to know more backstory on the development of that mode of transportation.
Yeah, that in itself is at least a short story.
At least a short story.
Again, if I didn't have so many, like you said,
irons in the fire.
irons in the fire. If this was all I was doing, I would totally write that novel now.
Casey, we've done a podcast before, and it was after, I think, your first novel, maybe your second novel.
No, I think that was the first one.
So, I've been a fan of yours since the beginning of the podcast, and we're in season 3 now. And I always knew you could write, but you have grown so much as a writer. I want to encourage everybody listening to this, even if you're not a Fallen World fan, buy this particular book. Very seldom am I able to say that an author wrote such a good novel that they threw away whole novel ideas that could have been developed into their own thing as just asides to continue the plot and the story that they're trying to tell. My best example of that is Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. When I first read it, I gave it to a friend of mine, and I told him, I said, stop whatever you're doing, read this from front to end, and call me when you're done, which he did. And we talked for 2 hours about how many novels was in that novel that Neil Stephenson just threw away, to advance the plot, the story he was trying to tell. This particular novel of yours is the first novel of yours that I have read, or the first story of yours that I have read, that literally has probably 5 good series novel ideas built into it that I would read, that I would pay money for, that you just throw away to advance the main story that you're trying to tell. So...
I'll be honest, I hadn't even thought about it that way. I think maybe with the writers a little bit, I had realized that. But as you're saying that, I'm like, what else is he talking about? Oh, yeah, there's that. Oh, yeah, and there's that too. Huh. Yeah, I guess I could have done that.
Well, like I said, our Texas Rangers, or I guess our Colorado Rangers, that could be a 4 or 5 book series in and of itself.
Oh, easily. Yeah, because we're talking about 20 years in the past and what's happened.
That's exactly right. I want to know more about Sue, the woman behind the throne. Why does she not want any responsibility other than the responsibility that she's willing to take on day to day? What happened to her that broke her so badly that she is so adverse? I want to know more about Kid. I want to see
him grow up.
Exactly. What growing up under those circumstances with those 2 parental figures, what that leads to. You literally have written one novel that you could pass 5 series off to other authors if you didn't have time to pursue. It's a really good job, Casey. I guess is what I'm
really
saying.
Appreciate that. I had not even thought about it like that, but now that you say it, now my mind is racing, and I'm like, okay, well, once I find that alternate pocket dimension where I can just disappear to and write without time passing in the real world, maybe I'll make that happen.
I can tell you how we can make this happen. I know this guy. What's his name? Oh, yeah, Chris Kennedy. He has like 48-hour days.
Yeah, he does. I don't know how he makes that happen, but he has learned the secret somehow.
But I want to tell you, the Casey that I fell in love with in the first novel is still there, but my boy's grown up. He is so much better.
I'll be honest, and I tried not to talk myself up much, but there was a huge ego boost between that first 4 Horsemen novel and my second one just from my editor. Because I wrote that first novel, and I want to say we went through 3 rounds of content edit before that was readable. And then, by the time it was all done, like, I'm really proud of where that wound up. But there's also the storytelling, like you say, the pacing it's a little bit non-traditional. I'll say that. And then when I basically wrote the sequel to that story, continuing the story of Bull, that novel, I sent it off to the editor. Backing up, that very first novel, I got like 5 pages of edits on the first round. And there was like 5 pages of like one-liners and things like that saying, fix this, change that, this doesn't work, blah, 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 blah. And, my soul was crushed and I was like, I'm never going to write again. This is horrible. But we worked through all of that and that novel came out and I was so proud of it. When I wrote the next novel, I sent it off to that same editor and I got it back and there were maybe like 3 sentences of, this could use a touch up. This is maybe work this a little bit differently. And I think this is, I don't know, mostly good, but change that. And I was like, wait, where's the rest of it? It's like, apparently from that novel, from novel 1 to novel 2, I'd learned a little bit.
Well, I'm one of the people who have seen you from beginning to end. And, I was willing to give you a buy once I learned that you were Casey, the other Casey, the female Casey's friend. But, you certainly stand on your own now. You're a great writer, Casey, and I whatever time you can put towards writing, I look forward to anything that has your name on it. Is there any social media, any place that you can point people to go to that want to see what you've done in the past and what's coming out in the future so they can keep track of what's going on and where your writing is going?
Yeah, you can definitely see me at my webpage, www.caseymoores, all one word, CASEYMOORES.net. I try and keep up on all my actual publications. I do have a Facebook page, Casey Moores Writer. Trying to think beyond that. I do have a Instagram account under Casey Moops, and I pretty much just use that for writing news. And then I think I've got a Twitter account, but I've never used it much. Sort of got into it when the flood was happening, and then I don't know, it's just sort of too much of a vast ocean of what's going on in here that I don't really keep up on that one. So yeah, those are the main ones, just my webpage, Facebook, and Instagram. I do have a mailing list. If you go to my webpage, you can just sign up for my mailing list, and every 2 weeks I'll discuss what's going on in my life and my writing, and then I'll usually be pushing other people's, some friends' novels, and then have a bunch of free giveaways. But beyond that, obviously, whenever I have something coming out, I'll make that the focus.
Well, I learned something. I think I'm going to have to sign up for that mailing list. I did not know you had that. Is there anything else that you want to tell the listeners? Anything else that we did not cover that I may not have asked you?
No, I think we covered it pretty well. But yeah, Gilded Cage, I believe it's coming out on or around Christmas. So take a look for it. In the meantime, while you're waiting for it, go back and check out the rest of the Fallen World as a whole. Specifically, for my sake, check out Among the Embers and find my story, The Blue Falcon, so you can see the background to where your main character. Though as I say that out loud, I hope it doesn't darken your viewpoint of one of my main characters too much to see what he does the day the world ended. It's not very good at all. But that's sort of the whole point, and that's what he's got to come back from.
But it did set you up for a great redemption novel.
That's the whole point. That's actually the entire title.
Yeah. So, man, I appreciate you taking time early this morning, way too early. As I said in my text to you, at this ungodly hour, to talk with me, and I will tell you, I am anxiously awaiting the Depic novel that you referred to, so hurry up and finish that. And maybe I can talk Chris into letting us do this again once that comes out, because the Depics are my favorite characters in the Four Horsemen universe.
Oh, I'll give a two-sentence snippet for that one. The short version is that there's two parallel plot lines in that one. One is a rebellious young kid who wants to be a punk rocker, and the other is my blind Zatoichi style cinema, Japanese samurai style samurai slasher classic, and those sorts of plot lines. So it's a really weird dichotomy that I spliced together, but I think I made it work in the end.
But I do love that character. So thank you so much, and we will talk to you again, I hope, soon, and appreciate you taking the time, and have a great holiday season.
You've been listening to the CKP Future Books Podcast with host Randall Willis. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider leaving it a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you subscribe. Show likes and channel subscriptions are also much appreciated on the CKP YouTube channel. Finally, if you'd like to know more about this author or others on the CKP roster, visit chriskennedypublishing.com. Thanks for listening to the CKP Future Books Podcast. We'll see you next time.